tuifanye Afrika mti wa uzima. Tuungane sote tuimbe pamoja, kuenzi shikamano hatima yetu. Tujitoe wenyewe kupambana pamoja, uhuru na umoja vitawale. Enyi bwana na binti wa Afrika, mwili wa jua, mwili wa anga, tuifanye Afrika mti wa uzima. Tuungane sote na tujibidishe kutoa kilicho bora kwa Afrika, chimbuko la wanadamu, chemchemi ya utamaduni, tumaini letu wakati wa mafarakano. Enyi bwana na binti wa Afrika, mwili wa jua, mwili wa anga, tuifanye Afrika mti wa uzima.
Most welcome to Humanist TV Africa. This is Humanist TV Africa. We are live, broadcasting from wherever you are. We are in Uganda, Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, UK, and the US. We do broadcast live our shows. And of course, we want to encourage you to please subscribe to Humanist TV Africa and be part of this show. My name is Kato Mukasa. I'm a Ugandan lawyer interested in issues, human rights, and of course, issues development. And this program is about food safety concerns, where we get experts from around the world and give us insights on issues that matter. Today, we're going to talk about prevention and control of aflatoxins. We have been lucky to have experts in this area. Professor Kaya is a doctor first, but of course, the professor is bigger than a doctor. I have Professor Kaya right there from Mackay University, my university. And of course, we have Madame Agnes Kirabo from Food Rights Alliance right there. We have Mr. Bambale Bernard, also a food rights expert, right with us today. Today, I'm going to be in the studio to discuss these matters. I'm going to request Mr. Bernard, is the youngest of the team, to give us a recap of what we covered in our last show. And then Professor will take us through the prevention strategies, and Madame Kirabo will supplement. Bernard, over to you. Give us a recap. You are muted, Bernard. Bernard, you are muted.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So, our dear viewers, we want to thank you, and we want to welcome you again to this show, where we're going to discuss more about aflatoxins. And of course, in the previous discussion, we had a number of things that we have already talked about. All of us know what aflatoxins are. We reflected on the dangers of aflatoxins, both to human health and trade in the previous discussion we had. And also we discussed the role of civil society organizations when it comes to improving the situation or the status quo when it comes to aflatoxin management. And then, of course, today we come again to discuss the same subject, but looking at now, what can we do now that we understand what this aspect is? And the question is, what can we do to prevent the occurrences of aflatoxins, but also looking at how best we can control the aflatoxins. So Professor will be taking us basically through the science of how best we can prevent these aflatoxins. And then Madame Chirabo and myself will be looking at the governance issues around prevention. What can government do in ensuring that we minimize or we control aflatoxins? So we request you to be with us during the course of the show. And please let us learn together and reflect on these issues and see how best we can contribute to the development of our society and the health of our people. So you're most welcome, Professor Kaya and Ms. Chirabo. Thank you so much for joining the show. Yeah, over to you, Mukasa. I think we can be able to start.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yes, that is a very good one because I've made my work easier by giving us responsibilities. The experts now know exactly who is going to handle what. Now, I'll go to Professor Kaya to give us that very important part of prevention of this animal called aflatoxins.
Thank you very much, Kato. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, our listeners, viewers, wherever you are. Once again, I'm Professor Achille Okaya from the Department of Food Technology and Nutrition, Makerere University. Last week, as Mr. Bambale has indicated, we discussed the health, the healthy, the food security, and also the trade impacts of aflatoxin. And I remember very well Agnes Kirabo talking about something very, very important. That is, sometimes we think about the macroeconomic when it comes to economic, impacts of aflatoxin. We think about at the country level, what without thinking about at the individual farmer level. Last Saturday, as soon as we finished this program, my father, who is actually 92 years old, has been is a very good expert in rearing poultry, and he has the 200 layers. They called me and told me that the birds are now week. I gave them a feed which was, clumping. It was like a lump. It had lumped together and it looked a little bit old. And I told him that they are likely to be having the effects of aflatoxin. And by Sunday, the following day, he had lost 40 birds. And by
Wow.
Monday, 180 birds died because of that. So we proved beyond reasonable doubt that actually they were the feeds containing aflatoxin because he stopped the feed immediately, introduced another feed for those which survived. They had not actually eaten too much of that feed which was contaminated. So now the old man is so depressed. You can imagine he has lost, the birds. He has lost money, and now he's so depressed. So these are the effects that we have been talking about. So I want to thank Agnes Kirabo who talked about the micro, the farmer level suffering as a result of these aflatoxins. Now, back to the subject that has been given to me. Prevention is very, very important. Management of aflatoxins is actually very, very important. And this is exactly what we want people to do. That's why we are making these awareness campaigns, advocacy, so that people can know and then start either preventing or control aflatoxin, in the crops and also in the feeds. Now, what you need to remember is that the aflatoxin contamination of food and the feed, is along the entire value chain. It starts from the field, like in case of maize and groundnuts, contamination starts from the field and continues along the value chain until you have products which can also be contaminated. So that being the case, therefore, if you are going to prevent or to manage, you need to start from the farm. So farmers need to help us and do the following. Good agricultural practices are key in preventing, aflatoxin contamination. Number one, good agricultural practices help to ensure that you come up, you grow a crop which is healthy and capable of resisting the fungus that actually produces these toxins. So it's like raising a baby, a healthy baby. A healthy baby will always be resistant against a number of diseases. But once a baby is stressed, it's the same thing. If a crop is stressed, it will definitely be very easily, affected by the fungi and including the fungus that produces aflatoxins. So what should the farmers do? Number one, it starts right away from seed selection. Use a healthy seed that is not contaminated with diseases. Some of these diseases are seed borne. Use a healthy seed. Go and get seed from the input suppliers, clean seed, and then start with that. Prepare your field very well, your garden, then plant on time. Sometimes this may not be practical now that rains just come anytime, but at least plant as early as possible. And look after the crop. We're talking about with susceptible crops like maize, groundnuts, soybean. Grow those crops very well so that they are healthy. And when it comes to the time of harvesting, maybe for harvesting, make sure that you do the weeding, you control the pests as required, pests and diseases as required, so that the crop is not stressed. And when it comes to harvesting, just harvest a crop on time. Do not delay. For our farmers, keep maize in the field because of a number of reasons, and it dries from the field. The longer it stays in the field, the higher the chances of aflatoxin contamination. Like now, it has been raining during the dry season, so maize has failed to dry. So the more the maize is rewetted when it is drying, along the crop, the higher the chances of getting contaminated. In fact, most Ugandans now, we're trying to harvest maize when it is already moldy because of staying in the field for a long time. So that's the problem. And during harvesting, make sure that you don't actually put the produce on bare ground. Some people harvest maize,
Mm.
remove the husks, and then place the cobs on bare ground. Ground is the best medium for, or the source of this fungus that produces aflatoxins. So now groundnuts, sometimes the farmers harvest groundnuts and leave them to dry in the field. They just sometimes pile them, before they pluck off the pods. And during that process, there is heat that builds up. And remember, the moisture content is still high, so the molds will grow very fast to produce aflatoxins. So if you have managed your crop very well up to the harvesting time and you have harvested very well, that one actually helps a lot. Now, the other issue that can be done when the crop is still in the field is the application of Aflasafe. Now, Aflasafe is a chemical. Actually, it is a chemical that contains strains of the aspergillus that don't produce aflatoxins. So these scientists have found out that these strains, which live in the soil also, can be concentrated and then applied like fertilizers, and this will compete with the fungus that produces aflatoxins in the soil. So it is not GMO, but rather it is uh, it is a product that contains live fungi that can as they eat, they are competing with those that produce aflatoxins. So this is it's a high science, but of course it has been simplified, that it can be put on, for example, sorghum grains, and then just broadcast the way you would actually broadcast some of the fertilizers. So that's one way of preventing, aflatoxin contamination when the produce is still in the field. Now, when it has been harvested, what should you do? Do not dry our produce on bare ground. Make sure that there is at least something that is protecting, the product from touching the ground. Because as I said, soil is the best medium for the fungus that produces aflatoxins. So dry faster if possible. In fact, in developed countries, drying takes the maximum of 48 hours, because the faster you dry, the easier, the easier to avoid the fungus that produces aflatoxins. But our farmers take long to dry the produce, because they are using open sun drying method and sometimes on bare ground. So you dry today, you take out you gather the produce, take it in the house, bring it out, several days. Sometimes it is raining during drying. Those are the conditions that favor, contamination by aflatoxins. So then, assuming that now you have got your product which is dry, when you are going to use it for food, make sure you use clean, you sort. You see, when you sort out the moldy grains, chances are that those grains which are moldy have got aflatoxins. So you use only clean, sound grains when you are processing, for example, flour. Like the processors of ground nuts, you need to practice what we call good manufacturing practices. Do not, please do not mill grains which are broken, kernels which are broken, kernels which are moldy, those which are shriveled, because they have got high levels of aflatoxin, and you don't expect to have kernels or grains which are contaminated with aflatoxins. You don't expect the flour which has come out of these kernels to be free from aflatoxins. So make sure that the grains that you use are actually clean, free from any kind of mold contamination. Then during storage, ensure that you store the produce when it is completely dried to save storage moisture content. The biggest challenge our farmers have, and I cannot blame them, that they don't have objective ways of telling that the produce has dried to the required storage safe moisture content. Yeah, so they just bite, they just shake, they look at the produce, and that is not actually good. So what most farmers are doing right now is through their cooperatives or through their farmer groups, they can access, moisture meters, and then they use those to measure the moisture, because that one now can quantify the amount of water in the produce, so it's such that you can tell that it is actually now dried to the required moisture content. Have your store clean, free from the grain that was of the previous storage of previous season. Clean, well ventilated, not leaking. So in that way, you can actually prevent the the contamination. Now, decontamination. You have prevented. You can also now decontaminate the grain, although it is actually very expensive. There are methods that can be used to decontaminate the grain. Like now in Uganda, we have got an equipment, a facility in Soroti, known as Tox Scrub, where they are using ozone gas to break down the aflatoxin chemical, into compounds that are not toxic. That is now for large scale, large scale commercial, traders. So they can use that, facility to decontaminate. Those who are processing animal feeds, they are animal, they are animal feed, what they call after animal feed toxin binders, which are clays. They are clays which can bind aflatoxins once the animal ingests the feed together with these clays. They can bind the toxins. In fact, if the manufacturer of that feed which killed my father's birds had included this toxin binder, there wouldn't have been any problem. So you can do that. Then there is, I think, ammonia has also been used by these manufacturers, large scale manufacturers, to see decontaminate the grains. And I think the last one which I want to talk about is nixtamalization. Like countries like South America, Mexico, they use maize which has been fermented using lime, and then they use that for making tortillas. So that is the process known as nixtamalization. We have actually tried it here, and we find out that if, for example, you soak maize grains, together with ash, our usual ash from the fireplace,
A
overnight,
book.
a VU, yes, overnight for 24 hours. Actually, it can
Yes.
bind those toxins. Yeah. And then the only challenge now is that the drying, if you're going to mill that into flour, the drying, process may take some bit of time because you are soaking the grains, and also use of fermented products to make porridge and the kosho, because we are not used to that. So that is what we are now still testing. But otherwise, these methods can do a very good job. So I think, unless otherwise, I think my colleagues can add on from there. But farmers, please, you have got a very big role to play. The other thing that I didn't talk about, which I forgot, doing farming, is crop rotation. Our farmers have
Okay.
got our farmers have got a system of growing maize and maize and maize and maize on the same farm.
Um,
So you leave those the fungus that causes aflatoxin behind, and then anytime you plant, it is actually there. But if you rotate maize, beans, then sometimes you put cassava, which is a little bit low, a long term, a crop. You tend to reduce the cycles for the the molds that produce aflatoxin. So that's the way I can think to, right now say about prevention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor. That is an education to me. And I do believe to all those who are listening, because you have said so many new terms to me. As a small scale farmer, I was listening and I really loved it. I would beg and request, of course, that in the next show, if possible, we would basically get some images about the issues we talked about, so that
Yes.
farmers can also be visible. Amaso g'Abaganda gali mu ngalo. We love to see things. Of course, Baganda, everyone, all of us are in the Bantu people. Now, if we could get some of these images in our next shows to be so good. I was getting everything you said, but if it was a bit of a visual, that'd been the best for us, especially people who have not gone to bigger classrooms. Yes, when they hear a term and then they see an image, I do believe it's going to be so good. Thank you so much, Professor. Agnes, if you can hear me, I don't know, your image is off. Agnes, if you can hear me, please, it's your time to come on board and educate us. But in the meantime, let us call Bernard. Bernard, please, can you please start from where the professor stopped?
Okay, so thank you so much, Professor. It was really good you taking us through the science at the farm level, at the storage level, and of course at other points of the value chain. It's very, very important that our farmers and our viewers are able to really appreciate these realities of the aflatoxins. And of course, Pato, prevention is always better than cure.
Yes.
You can imagine if the aflatoxins are not in the food and people are not having cancers and people are not having this malnutrition and whatever, then we'd have a better population. Actually, from our previous discussion, someone sent me a comment and I was saying that, okay, you guys, you have proof that if you don't have aflatoxins, someone can live for 100 years and above. So
Yeah.
when he watched that, I told him, no, it's really not about spending 200 years on Earth. It's about even if you died early, but how do you die? We don't
Yeah.
want you to die because you're sick of something that you would have prevented. Now, going ahead, we now have to reflect on what is the role, leave alone the farmer. Let us look also at the government side. Let us look at our leaders. Let us look at the available civil society organizations. What is our
Mm.
role in contributing to, control or prevention of aflatoxins? The first question I've been reflecting about has been, Professor says we must have, infrastructure to help us, dry thoroughly and all this. The question is that now our farmers who are out there planting a lot of maize, do they have capacity to set up infrastructure to enable them to dry this maize or these peanuts? So I think it would be very good that governments should also be in position to support farmers, come up with decent infrastructure where the cooperatives, farmer cooperatives, can actually dry their food. If you look at our food and nutrition policy of 2003 for Uganda specifically, the government is supposed to set up food reserves, meaning that there is a provision for setting up these reserves where people can actually store food appropriately for a longer time. So the question is that
Mm.
now, do we have them? Since 2003, do we have these reserves? Is government interested in setting up infrastructure for farmers to be able to dry? We have solar dryers. Professor is talking about, okay, we should dry this food very fast, but are farmers in position to set up this kind of infrastructure? So I think it would be very good that governments have to invest money because, by the way, I don't know if you've seen this paper in 2017, I think 2017, 2018, we lost about 600,000 metric tons of cereal due to aflatoxins. And economists were saying that we lost about 180 billion. That is the amount of
Wow.
money we're losing just because of aflatoxins. Now, this is a huge loss, economic loss to government, that government can actually prevent by just providing society or communities with these drying sheds, with this kind of, infrastructure. Let us also look at, last time I said that our maize was rejected in Sudan a few months ago and in Kenya just because of aflatoxin. And surprisingly, this food, we do not know where it was banned from. So probably it came back to the community here in Uganda and we consumed it. Now, the question I've been asking ourselves as a country, our farmers, our aggregators, our experts, do we have equipment to ascertain that actually this maize is free of aflatoxins before we can take it out? Because in reality, the country loses, that dignity of trade, of international trade, and yet we could have prevented it. So the question is that now, do we have infrastructure in place to determine how much aflatoxins we have in our food before we can actually put it on market? Schools are consuming this maize. If the maize was rejected from the different border points, it means that this same maize is actually in the schools being consumed by about I don't know how many million children. So it would be very good that we invest in quick testing of this maize before it can come to the market, before the consumers can have access to it. We can actually even invest in research. Which diagnostic tools do we have that can actually be used at farmer level? Are our farmers having diagnostic tools? Because we should be having these, rapid tests at the cooperative level. The cooperatives should be able to detect whether their maize they're stocking actually has aflatoxins before they can push it out to the consumers. These are things that the consumers or the traders may not have, but the government can actually invest around there, even if it's not government, but maybe they could be civil society organizations or NGOs. This could be our mandate, this could be our role. How do we invest in science, innovations that can actually prevent these aflatoxins? We could also be looking at innovations. How is government, how are NGOs, how is the UN promoting science? How are scientists being supported to come up with alternatives? If we look at Aflasafe and these other binders, where are they? Can we access them? Are scientists facilitated to make them available to the consumers or to the farmers to use to ensure that aflatoxins are prevented? In terms of enabling environment, we have actually policies that are being implemented. We could be having a number of policies that speak about this. I know that even in Uganda we have a council, brain council, and all this. But then the question is that, okay, are we facilitating these councils to do their role? Are they able to reach out to the masses to create awareness? We actually noted in 2017, there's a study I was reading, which indicated that actually people in the value chain of grain, we seem not to understand aflatoxin. We don't know about it. Even the policymakers do not understand aflatoxins. Even the extension workers do not understand aflatoxins. Even farmers are not understanding aflatoxins. So the awareness is still very minimal. And then how do we ensure that we reach out to the community, serve them with this information at lower local level. If it means going to the churches, because that's where people are, we go there and spread the gospel of prevention of aflatoxins. I think we need to change the methodology. If people are not watching TV, are we on radio? If people are not listening to radio, are we in churches? If people are not in churches, are we reaching to these social events and teach people about this subject? I think it will be very helpful for us to reach out to the masses and be able to provide information to our people. And maybe lastly, the earlier days, we used to have cooperatives where people would come together and bring their produce together. And like these days, the cooperatives seem to have died off. Can we reinstate these cooperatives so that they enable us to reach out to all these farmers in an organized setting, provide them the tools to use to measure moisture content, to measure aflatoxin content, etc. I think with those small milestones, if we invest money in there, we can prevent, we can even control issues around aflatoxins and save humanity from these diseases that keep coming as a result of aflatoxins. And also we can boost the trade of cereal that comes along that is actually hindered by aflatoxins in the current setting. So I think those are some of the issues that we could look at maybe higher level in terms of investment, in terms of research, in terms of monitoring environment, in terms of awareness. So I think because I don't think I can be able to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you so much. I was learning from
Can
you,
I
and I have
also?
questions for you. I have questions for you, Bernard. Uh,
Yes.
just think about it. You answer later after Miss Agnes Kilabo. The question is, you were talking about cooperatives. A country like
Maybe
Uganda,
maybe I can add on.
yes, Professor Adon. In fact, Professor, there's a comment for you from Constant Uganda. Dennis, can you please get us that comment on the screen? Professor Kaya, it rains almost every day here in Uganda. How best can a local farmer dry their cereals to prevent aflatoxins? Local farmers cannot afford some of these preventive practices. Back to you, Professor Kaya.
Thank you very much. A very good question. But maybe before I answer that, let me
Yes,
add it a little bit to what Mr. Bombali was saying. Uganda
yes.
has established, the Uganda government has established standards. Actually, it was among the first countries in East Africa to establish aflatoxin standards, regulatory levels, and it is actually 10 parts per billion, which has been harmonized, all along the, within East African community, East African states. Now, the biggest challenge is that those standards which have been come up with, which have been developed by Uganda National Bureau of Standards (UNBS), they are not actually followed. People are not aware of these standards. The enforcement is very poor. Implementation is poor. That's why he was even talking about the policymakers not being aware of these. So if they were aware of these standards, and if these standards were actually implemented, wouldn't be having a problem. Now the issue of raining, as I mentioned, the farmers are facing a serious problem during drying their produce. Since they are using open sunning dry method, and the problem we have is that it continues to rain during the dry season. In fact, Uganda is blessed so much that we have rains. We don't have a pure dry season in most cases. But that's the disadvantage. The farmers who are drying the produce, what should they do?
Mm.
The best things that should have been done is to establish farmer groups or cooperatives. Just like we have the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. Let it be. Let us have cooperatives. Through cooperatives, farmers can pool resources, and through these resources, they can afford, there are simple drying technologies which can be affordable if they can pool resources. And I've seen this work in Rwanda. they have where the cooperatives are very active. The farmers can afford dryers of different capacities, and these dryers can do a very good job within 24 hours. Within 48 hours, the produce is dry. So why don't we do that even here? But as long as farmers remain separate, you're talking about individual farmers all the time. These are smallholder farmers. The problem is going to continue. That's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, Professor. Yes, that's the issue at hand. Bernard, honestly, as you see our farmers in Uganda, all of us are individually based. All of us are doing our things our own way because we no longer have cooperatives. When I was growing up in the 80s, I saw cooperatives in Uganda. I should say I was young, but my grandfather in the 80s was part of the cooperatives. In fact, my maternal grandfather and my paternal were part of the cooperatives. We had a coffee growers association, a cooperative. There was a cotton, and there was a coffee one. I mean, coffee, even other cereals, but no longer there. Now, what do we do? Because now we are so much individualistic. Do we organize these farmers? Do you advise them to set up their own groups at a village level? One day I was watching Bukede TV about a year ago, and I was happy to see a farmer somewhere in Kayunga was a farmer making lots of money out of paper, hot paper. But he had a way of drying it using very simple technology. He buys some wire mesh and something like that, then he makes his own stands and dries the stuff. So I do think that if you get these good practices from these farmers, maybe share them with other farmers, we may have a way forward. Now, Miss Agnes Chirabo, I don't know whether you can hear me. Your video is off. Yes, Agnes, why don't we have you now here?
Okay, thank you, Professor Kaya and Bernard, for the conversation. And what I'm going to do is to compliment both of you. And let me start with complimenting Professor Kaya. Professor Kaya has talked about what we should do to control aflatoxin contamination. Let me also talk about what you should stop doing, because there is also what people should stop doing yesterday. Because of the challenges that the viewers have put before us here, it is raining every day and blah blah. By the way, my over 15 years work in the agriculture sector, I have learned that the most stressing period of a production cycle to farmers is the harvesting time. It would have been the most joyous period, but it is the most frustrating, it is the most difficult period. And now what farmers have resorted to do with the traders is actually to take maize shellers in the field, direct into the fields. They do shell the maize from the field, bag it, and then load it on trucks. The moisture content is still too high. And because our farmers are smallholder farmers, majority of them, some of these bags spend days, if not a whole week, on the truck, while the trader is soliciting for these grains from the various farmers. And you can just imagine they are wet, they are not dry grains, and they are packed, so they are accumulating heat. And just look at the incubation of aflatoxins in that manner. So that one, if possible, let us stop it. The other practice that we must stop doing is the way we store. Many of us, despite the fact that government through the Bureau of Standards came up with the standards of storage facilities, how they are supposed to look like, many of us, you just find a redundant home, a corner somewhere, multi-purpose in a garage, in a store, in the corner of the kitchen, in the corner of the corral, just like one where this cow is crying from, and then you push the grains there. We should stop doing that, whether it is grains or whether it is maize flour. Bernard was talking about aflatoxin in schools, the bleeding places, the storage facilities. How many of us have actually inspected these storage facilities where at the start of the term, just as it is now, school administrators stock in real stock they stock all the maize flour they will need for the 3 months. Throw it in a certain structure that is redundant, maybe it was everything is called a store. So we should stop also doing that. I know COVID-19, even myself, I'm a victim, is that until when we were heading to the lockdown, is when I realized that in my house, while constructing it, there was no designated place to keep processed foods like maize flour, rice, groundnuts, and all the things that we stocked. And I believe there are so many people who are like me. I believe there are so many, because me, I'm a food person, I'm a food safety person, but my house was constructed, completed, and I went to occupy it. It is COVID-19 that woke me up to say, I didn't designate and construct a particular place in my house. to store food. And so many people buy food that has survived contamination, but it gets contaminated from their houses. There is that bag, a kavera, where everybody is just with a wet cup and scoops some flour and cooks porridge, and then until when the whole consignment in that particular household gets finished. The same to animal feed. Sometimes you would buy safe feed, but how you store the feed then also could be the ones that are causing contamination. So as we are talking about the practices, I thought that I could compliment Professor and my colleague Bernard, and we condemn some of the practices in the strongest breath we can that many of us are doing, either while we are aware or while we are not aware. I think, like Professor said, we must keep the grain very dry, very, very dry, that even when you pick that grain, you can't break it with your teeth. And so we should keep the flour. Look at the retailer shops where people go, especially in the urban areas, regularly to buy buunga, to buy binyebwa, groundnuts, and all. Let us all close our eyes and imagine those retailer shops, because all of us, perhaps in this part of the world, in Africa, in Uganda, you have ever been to the shop, and you know the bags remain open throughout. Whether for groundnuts, whether for maize flour, they remain open throughout. So also the retail shops are other breeding grounds. The transportation, the vehicle, the truck that took cement or that took herbicides on its return is the one that carries maize grains back to the city. The trucks carry anything. It goes with the bricks and comes back with groundnuts. It goes with the fertilizer and it comes back with maize flour. And it spends days and whatever on route while the grains, the maize flour are being exposed now en route in terms of transportation. So, like I said last time, we are all guilty as charged. At least we have ever engaged in any of these practices, or we have watched them and we walked away without being concerned. Now, regarding what needs to do, everybody talks about an enabling environment. And I think it is one of those concepts that everybody has his or her own definition. And I think Bernard tried to get there. If we are going to deal with aflatoxins, we must appreciate that grain is not those small seeds that we see at every harvesting season. If we have decided to be a grain producing country, there are certain things we cannot continue doing as they were. We can't leave the issues of grains totally into the hands of the smallholder farmers. We need to organize our production, because this infrastructure Bernard was talking about is quite very expensive infrastructure. I one day visited Iowa State in the US, and I actually saw that farmers were sharing the grains from the field, although they are using combined harvesters, but immediately, the truck takes those grains to the storage facility. It doesn't even spend hours. They take the grains to the storage facility, where the storage facility is also having drying facilities. And then there is a system that records trucker X came to the facility at 10:30. It belongs to Katomukasa. They brought maize of so much. So many grains were broken. So many grains were whole. And the moisture content was at this level. And this particular consignment has been taken to point Q. So by the time the trucker drives out of the system, The truck driver is going out with an automated printed piece of paper with all these details. Now, if farmers in America cannot afford such a facility, we cannot talk about farmers in Rengo, or farmers in Chenjejo, or farmers in Madudu, or farmers in Maokota. I'm sure these are the areas where the four of us are coming from. They can't afford that. And therefore, if we have chosen to be producers of grain, and it is a strategic enterprise that we are even selling to the regions, then we have to get to invest and put a system where such a common user facility then waives off most of the costs such that our grains don't become extremely expensive. Bernard talked about integrating this education of specific issues like aflatoxin control into our extension services. Our farmers, by and large, the ratio of an extension worker to a farmer is one extension worker now to 1,800. It is still high, meaning that majority of the farmers are Malaga producing. So while we are battling with extension, it should not be an omnibus. Now we are talking about specialized extension, and that specialized extension for the areas that are producing grain, those specialized extension workers to provide this education and practices that we are talking about to these farmers, but at the same time, the entire value chain actors. So because I came to compliment and my colleagues have done a great deal, I think I can call it for now done. Over to you, Mr. Kato Mokasa.
Mchala Agnes Kirabo, you have given us a comprehensive education, I should tell you. I was in class taking notes right in my small head here. And I should say it was a good education. Now, I have to thank you so much. And I have to give you this analysis from what you have said. But before I forget, I want to request our panel that next Saturday, we have episode 2 of this very topic. But this time you get us some images. For us who didn't go to these bigger institutes to understand the aflatoxins, we can be able to view. These are very beautiful things you are giving us, but give us some bit of images so that my villager, I cut out a clip and send it to my farmers in Rengo. There. So having said that, Madam Kirabo, you have really helped us. Plus, of course, Professor Kaya and Bernard. To me, I was learning. I should give you this experience of mine. My mother used to stop us from buying peanuts from the factory. Let me call them factory, where they shell them, then they give you the paste. She would always insist that we use the mortar, call it a mortar and pestle, the chinu. We use the chinu to make our own paste. She would always say, look, I don't trust these machines. And for us, we to say, maybe mom, because she's getting old, she's just old-fashioned. But now I'm thinking that she was more conscious about the safety of the food. Secondly, as we have said, all of you, the way we keep our food is the problem. We buy food in our houses, we simply put it there on the ground. It is getting contaminated. So I'm learning from you that it starts with us in our individual households to keep this flour safe, to keep this peanut paste safe. It starts with us. Talk about Europe here, where people put everything in the refrigerator. Me, I have problems with the refrigerators. You may educate me on that, because I think sometimes, maybe, how do you keep food for 3 months in the refrigerator? I'm just asking you guys who are more knowledgeable than myself. Is this food still really food? And you tell me I'm going to eat after 3 months because it's in the refrigerator. Finally, my observation. When I first left university in 2003, I got a job with the International Food Policy Research Institute. It had an office right there in Makerere University, International Food Research Policy Institute. I was a research assistant. And our project by that time was working on horticulture producers in Uganda. So he went into these districts to evaluate these farmers. And actually, my immediate supervisor was Dr. May saying, and you should be knowing him, Professor Kaya. That was my boss. I was working with the IFPRI, International Food Policy Research Institute. Now, I used to go there as a researcher to ask questions. But what I observed is our farmers were not prepared, especially how to sell food, how to keep it safe. And our role as IFPRI was to tell them what to do. So I do think that if we have these organizations, more than IFPRI, small organizations in each district, doing this kind of education, I think we can be better than what we are today. Now, I want to take it back to Professor Akaya to give us a short going forward, like a summary, because we have 9 minutes, we're going to share them. My time is over. You're going to give Professor Akaya 3 minutes to give us a way forward for today.
Thank you very much, Katomo Kasa. Very good insights, of course, very good comments, and the way you have brought it. The issue of the mortar and the pestle, of course, is a very good one. And we all want to continue using it. But, unfortunately, people seem to be always in a hurry now. It's like we no longer have the time, that one is time consuming, and we want faster things. In fact, because of the need for faster things, we have compromised for quality and safety, unfortunately. The technology of milling, for example, groundnuts, wouldn't be a bad one. I wouldn't want to condemn it completely, but how is it actually done? That's the problem. Because people use rudimentary equipment, the machines are just fabricated, they are not food-grade machines. And then when the type of groundnuts that they are actually milled, as I said, they are the broken, the diseased, the rotten, the shriveled, which are high in aflatoxin, unfortunately. But if we were actually practicing it quite well, in fact, for me, at home, here at my home, I use a blender, stainless steel blender. And then I make sure that the kind of groundnuts that I actually, mill are sound. They are sorted, clean, not broken. So that at least at the end of the day, I'm sure that even if aflatoxins are there, they are below the levels that are, are regulated. See, so the technology is not actually bad, but the way we are doing it, and all along I've been talking about moral decay, morals in this country. People are doing certain things you cannot believe. I have a sister of mine who is, a businesswoman in groundnuts. She tells me that the people no longer sort stones, nails, everything is just milled. So you can imagine. So. In conclusion, I think that we still have a long way to go. If government does not actually wake up, to control the whole system, the food system, we are just wasting our time. Let the laws work. Let what we actually promise to do it. It is a constitutional, for example, a law that the government provides the reserves. As Mr. Wambali was saying, so let the reserves be there. Let us establish the cooperatives. The Ministry of Trade should actually help farmers to establish cooperatives. They revive them, as their name says. Let the cooperatives be there. Farmers will be able to pool resources, and then they should be able to be educated. Cooperatives, through cooperatives, you can do a lot of things. Education, practices, etc., which can actually help us to minimize quality and safety issues of our food. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, Professor Akawa. Yeah, that was really very good today. We hope to get you back here on Saturday. You educate us more. For us, we want to be visual. Yes, we shall be back here on Saturday and see more images and tell us more about prevention and control of this aflatoxins. Now, let us go to Madam Kiravo to give us a final shot there before you go to Bernard.
Okay, and thank you so much, Professor Kaya. We need to know that there is what we call bioweapons And
Okay.
aflatoxins is one of them. It's a bioweapon. It's a biosecurity issue. And I'm one of those people who subscribe to the thinking that we should start treating issues of food safety, intentional contamination of food, intentional mismanagement of food as a crime and be treated as one. Because people are doing it intentionally, people are doing it out of greed, just like Professor Kaya has said. It is not moral decay, it is greed. And therefore, if
Great.
you've chosen to be greedy, then let us hold you as a criminal and deal with you as one. Until when we get to that level, then we are going to continue talking about these things and just talking about them. Prof has talked about the kind of machinery and equipment that are being used to process our foods. Heavens on earth. Where Uganda, we are over-governed. The levels at which we are governed. We have VISO, we have PISO, we are about to get a home internal security officer. We are over-governed. And I'm wondering why this is happening and it cannot be stopped. I think government should stop talking about banning these non-food graded processing equipments, and then we shall deal with other issues later. So for me, I think let us all subscribe to better business, and then we have better food, because food just does around from your factory to the school where your child is going to. So as we go into this week, let us all challenge ourselves on our practices and on our actions once the food gets into our hands. While we are waiting for government, by the time government comes, we shall all long be dead. Safe food is a safe and healthy population. And that is that, nothing much, nothing less. I thank you.
You have nailed it better. This government will find us dead, of course. And you should be the government, because if the government is about to have a home PISO, VISO, whatever, useless politicians doing a lot of useless things. Let's go to Bernard.
All right.
Bernard.
I want to appreciate you colleagues for for this time and really for a very nice discussion we've had this afternoon. And of course, as I've always said, it's everyone's business. You know, food safety is everyone's business. You dodge it there, you find it the other side. So it is everybody's business. So we need to invest ourselves. And if awareness is the challenge, we need to look at better ways of sensitizing our people. We need, I think, to change. We need to, I think, quickly move to the roots down there and sensitize our masses, including our leaders, because our leaders, they seem not to be understanding these things. But I think one of the biggest issues that I've picked in this country is the issue of buy Uganda, build Uganda, something like that. Now you find that people think that, okay, we are building Uganda, we are buying Uganda, so you start doing wrong things. You start making machinery from iron, and you know the properties of iron. They wear out, they rust, you know. And in the name of building Uganda, buying Uganda, that indiscipline, I think, should really end. And our leaders should work hard to make sure that we streamline food. Because food, if the country has no food, then even this security they talk about is not there, it cannot be guaranteed. So together, I believe we can, and we must reach out to our leaders. We even tell them the policies they have worked on, and bring some bit of common sense to them, I think, to be able to reach out to the masses. I thank you, colleagues, for honoring the invitation to be part of this discussion. And Kato, thank you for hosting us. And I think we meet again on Saturday next week. And we shall be grateful to also come up with other pictorials and also our last session of this month on aflatoxins. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. Bernard. Thank you so much, Professor Kaya. Thank you so much, Madam Agnes Kirabo. To me, I'm a student, and I keep on learning. And I share this information with my small-scale farmers in Rengo, and that's it. I wish to see you again next weekend, where we shall be able again to teach ourselves. Me, I'm learning, but also my small-scale farmers in Rengo, in Uganda, in Africa, because we're being watched in several countries as we go live. Thank you so much, our viewers. And of course, thank you so much, Dennis Bongole in the studio. Thank you so much, everyone. And please keep on sharing this very show to ensure that people get this information and are able to learn the way I learned. Thank you so much. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Tuungane sote na tushereke pamoja ushindi kwa ukombozi wetu. Tujitoe wenyewe, tusimame pamoja kulinda uhuru na umoja wetu. Enyi Bwana na binti wa Afrika, mwili wa jua, mwili wa anga, tuifanye Afrika mti wa uzima. Tuungane sote tuimbe pamoja, kuenzi shikamano hatima yetu. Tujitoe wenyewe kupambana pamoja, uhuru na umoja vitawale. Enyi Bwana na binti wa Afrika, mwili wa jua, mwili wa anga, tuifanye Afrika mti wa uzima. Tuungane sote na tujibidishe kutoa kilicho bora kwa Afrika. Chimbuko la wanadamu, chemchemi ya utamaduni.